deciding when to sell and when to hold.
Turn down for what? Turn down for what?
Hey, what's up guys? Dan Trivedi here. Hope you're all well. So this is another video all about property investing basics. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about knowing when to sell a property and knowing when to hang on to it. But as ever, before we get started, I just need you all to do me a huge favor, and that is to smash the like button and don't forget to hit subscribe. So second video in property investing basics, and this one might not sound like a hot topic. It's not just knowing when to hold and when to sell, it's being in the position that you can do both, which is the underlying message in this video. So like a couple of other videos, I'm gonna give you the cherry that I would normally give right at the end of the video to keep you all watching right at the start, which is starting with getting yourself into a position that you could sell and that you could hold. It doesn't matter. Then we're gonna talk about when you should sell and when you should hold. But in this market, we know that property prices are way over top. It is a booming market. And I've always said when your taxi driver or your hairdresser tells you to buy property, tells you to buy cryptocurrency, tells you to buy anything, it is the time to step back and observe the masses, but try and slip in between the cracks and pick up those great deals. Now, it isn't necessarily the taxi driver and the hairdresser, but what is a topic of conversation which is consistent to anyone that I am talking to, new to property or in the process of buying sort of numbers 2 to 4, is that they are convincing themselves that they should be paying over the price, these high prices, because they're just going to hold on to it. So what difference does it make? And they'd rather have the money in a deal than sat in the bank. Those words, that sentence is a recipe for disaster. It might not look like it now, but when things do start to turn, whether it's a market adjustment, interest rate rises, or something else that can affect the market, those individuals in those types of deals are going to find themselves in very deep water very quickly. And I speak from experience because I went through the last crash, albeit with a much, much smaller portfolio, and that enabled me to sell a couple at a loss and hold on to some really loss-making properties. I'm not talking about negative equity, which is one of the things that you should all be considering. It's loss-making, where the rent is not covering the monthly mortgage. And this is where I have to be really direct. Convincing yourself to overpay for property because the money is better in a deal than it is in the bank is a fool's way of buying properties. And I say that very directly, not to make you feel bad, to make you stand back and take note of what the fuck you're doing. We are literally close to 0% interest rates in the biggest booming market, driven by artificial inflation, I think, in the history of property. Those 3 or 4 things have never come together at once. And yes, it is driven by the recovery of the pandemic, but the recovery will not be here forever. And putting yourself in a position where you are relying on the absolute maximum prices today increasing over the next 10 years is a recipe for disaster. If you are buying a property 10, 15, 20% more than what it was selling for pre-pandemic, and you are using the philosophy that you're going to get the rental income and it's going to cover your mortgage and you're going to be making money and a return on investment on the money that you've put in, so it's okay, isn't going to work long term. If you buy a property at the height of the market and you spend money refurbishing it, and that market either plateaus or even adjusts backwards, you fall into something called negative equity. That means the property is worth less than what it's cost you in the open market, which means if for whatever reason you had to sell, you would be seeing a loss. Now that loss can be anything from a few £100 to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. And it all depends on the types of properties you're buying and how much they are and how big the debt is and all these fundamentals. And we're not going to go into that on this video, but you must try and buy yourself into a position of strength. The last property that I bought to convert to a 5-bed student house was September last year. I paid $217 for it. They're selling for $270 plus those exact same properties needing the exact same amount of work. That is a massively overinflated price. And if you're going to convince yourself that you should be buying them, then you need to step back and rethink. I suppose, so that's my rant over. Let's talk about when you should sell and when you should buy. Now, let's assume that you haven't bought yourself into a position of weakness by paying these overinflated prices, and you are buying yourself into a position of strength. That means that you can rent or you could sell. You have the option to do the two. Because when you don't have the option to do the two, you don't have a choice. So you might as well click off this video, because I'm talking about when to sell, when to rent, when you have a choice. So let's stick with a typical type of house which you would convert to, say, a student house. And the rental income is giving you a great return. And also there's a great bit of equity because you've bought really well. Now, when do you decide to sell? Now, I'll start with the rental, knowing when to hold on to it. Now, my view has always been to refinance and take every single penny of the money that it's cost you to do the deal out. But if you can't do that, or you do it and some money is left in, if you're getting all of your money back within 12 months, I think that's a pretty good deal. Equally, look at the cash margin, forget the return on investment. Now, the effort and time for that property, bearing in mind it's a brand new refurbished house, should be an absolute minimum amount of management and issues going on with that property. But you still have to account for time, finding tenants, dealing with issues and all of those things. So forget the return on investment, look at it as a cash margin. Now, my minimum cash margin per property is £1,000 net. Forget the return on investment for a second. If that property isn't paying me an absolute minimum of £1,000 per month after all the costs, it's probably not going to be worth my time. And if you can work it so it's a return on investment which is infinite, which I mentioned on the last video because you've had all of your money out, and it's delivering you a minimum of £1,000 or even more, then in my mind, that is a keeper. You should keep hold of that property. Also, look at the fundamentals against the rest of your portfolio. If you're looking at a newly refurbished property which is producing great return on investment, if not infinite, and great cash flow margin, and it's now one of your best positioned properties for your first and secondary market, then that strengthens your portfolio. So by selling your strongest player makes your overall team weaker, just like in any sport. So that is another consideration to retain that property. Flip it on its head, those same reasons are reasons to sell properties. So let's say you've bought a property which is not in your prime location. It's actually out there on the outskirts, which doesn't tick the primary market. So you have to charge a little bit of a lower rent. So that means your cash margin is just under that £1,000 minimum target. The return on investment isn't a year, it's going to pay you back in 2 years. Or the market that you're playing to, you see that there is a shift coming, or there's some new guys coming into the market which are going to capitalize on the opportunity and oversaturate the market that this particular house is in. At that moment in time, it isn't happening, but you can foresee it coming. This is all about understanding your market. So that is when I would take a view, take emotion out of it, and even though it's a brand new refurbished property, it looks really good, you've got great tenants in there, and it's maybe hitting the return on investment or getting the cash flow, try and foresee the market. Entrepreneurs, millionaires, great business people are built on trying to understand what the market is going to do, not what it's doing right now. And if you think that there is going to be a shift where it could have a negative impact on that property, get it on the market. Capitalize on the absolute peak of that property's life and get out and get your money out. Then to flip it even further on its head is knowing when to sell a property that you have potentially bought to keep, or it's a flip. If it's a buy and sell and a flip, it's a bit of a no-brainer. But I'm in this conundrum myself. I've got a great student house. I got it really below market value. I've turned it into 5 bedrooms, 5 en suites. It's a great property, probably one of my best. I've got it rented already for the next 18 months at an over market rent. I've capitalized on the students' requirements to be really close to the university and have great accommodation. So it's a great return and it ticks all of those boxes. All of my money is out of the deal. The cash flow is closer to 2,000 than it is 1,000. It's improved my overall portfolio. It's one of the best players in my team. But the market is massively overinflated. There are people that I've referred to already in this video climbing over themselves to overpay, convincing themselves the reason why they should get the money out of the bank to buy these properties. And that means that I could sell this, and I have had offers of 20% beyond the absolute top of the price that I ever expected it to be worth. So that is a massive consideration, because a refinance is only ever going to give you so much money back out. And it's only ever going to give you a valuation based on market comparables. So you're never going to get this type of valuation on a refinance. So the question I have to ask myself is if I capitalize on the overinflated market today and I pull out 20-25% higher valuation on selling that property, which nets me a cash equivalent of say 75 to 100 grand extra, what can I go and do in the marketplace? Not necessarily today, but in the short-term future, 6 to 12 months, when I see the market shifting and moving, what can I do with that money that is going to impact my portfolio for all the reasons I've said more positively than it currently does with that asset? And if I ask myself those questions, and it doesn't necessarily mean selling that and buying another student house, it might mean that I think there's going to be a shift in the commercial market. So I want massive amounts of cash to go and buy properties in the commercial market, which may deliver me 4 or 5 times what this one currently does. All those things are taken into account. Also, your tax position. If you've bought it to sell it, you should have geared up to maximize the tax efficiency on that property. But if you've bought it to hold it, but you can sell it, you might be in a position where you're looking at quite a large corporation tax bill, or even a capital gains tax bill if it's in your personal name. So all of these things have to be taken into account. But if, when all is said and done, I believe that that project being sold delivers me cash to do 2 or 3 better projects individually on their own merit, apples for apples versus this project would be better, and I can do more than one of them, then I take the very difficult decision to sell that property, which you might think I am absolutely mad and I'm taking a step backwards. But believe me when I say, at 36 years old, that is how I've rinsed and repeat and bought so many great deals and been able to continue to do them, by taking the hard decisions and knowing when to sell and when to hold. But look, I hope you found that topic of interest, even though the headline and the topic at hand probably wasn't the most attractive thing to talk about, but it does resonate in today's market. Please don't take it personally if you are buying these properties at overinflated prices. Just step back and don't convince yourself and find a reason not to do the deal. And there is plenty more of reasons not to overpay for a property in today's market. But look, that's it from me. Hope you found the content rich, and I'll catch you all on the next video.
Fire loud, another rocket shot.